Tell us a little bit about the app drivers courier union. I don't know that we have anything that is really in any way analogous in this country.
Well, I think you do. I think there has been all sorts of interesting developments in the trade union movement as workers have organized organically within the gig economy. So, for example, you've got Rideshare Drivers Unite in California, who's been doing a great job at organizing drivers. There's something like 20,000 drivers organized in California, a new model of organizing. And I think the App Drivers and Couriers Union is a relatively young and new union in the United Kingdom also that has sprung up to deal with the unique problems of gig economy workers. We're growing very, very fast and growing even faster through the pandemic, because I think the pandemic has shown workers just how vulnerable they really are in the gig economy and how important it would be and is to have statutory protections. And we need to fight for those protections.
Okay, now you've just won a pretty big and important case in the British Supreme Court. The case is Uber BV versus Aslam. Tell us what that case was about and how you got involved. Let's back up a little bit. How you got involved in the case is also how the story of how you got involved in the union in many respects. So just tell us, lead up to what this case is about and how you got involved.
Well, myself and Yaseen Aslam came together. He's our union president of ADCU back in 2014, 2015. And I was an archetypal gig worker. I was taking a career break, and I thought I could, while I set up another enterprise that I was setting up, that I could work in the gig economy and earn some extra money. That came to a crashing halt after I was assaulted one evening in March 2015. And it took Uber 10 weeks from that date to identify the assailant to the police, to actually cooperate with the police. And that caused me to look at the contracts, because I was really curious about where duty of care lay. And once I looked at the contracts, I understood what the problem really was. And the problem is that the driver is directly contracted with the customer and the customer with the driver. And Uber sets itself up in the cloud as just an agent. And so it didn't want to get involved in my assault because it didn't want to trigger a public liability to passengers. It didn't want to trigger employment liability to me. And it didn't want to trigger sales tax liability for itself by acknowledging the truth that it is a transport operator and not an internet service company.
Just to be clear, so you were assaulted by someone who hailed you on a rideshare app.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right. So it wasn't a random third party. No. It was somebody. And this is, so when you talk about Uber wanting to maintain an arm's length distance from your relationship with this person, is because they know if they take a step towards that, they're implicated in, like you said, those three different aspects there.
Yeah, okay. That's exactly right. And that's the game of misclassification. You know, you enter this hall of mirrors where, you know, we're not allowed to call things what they really are, you know. So that's starting with the gig economy. What gig? It's a job. It's not a gig. Right. There's no soccer moms, you know, doing Uber, you know, between school runs. There's no jobbing actors doing Uber between auditions. There may be some, but they're a very small minority. These are working people trying to earn a living at this work. It's not a gig. So, you know, the language and the framing of how work is established in the gig economy is a big part of the misclassification problem. But separately, my colleague Yaseen Aslam, he had started with Uber almost from the very beginning. So, and he'd been riding this early stage of high fares, lots of gravy incentives, because that's how you get a network primed, by offering everybody incentives to get on board, drivers and riders. And then you start taking it back. And Yaseen was there organizing people at the early point when Uber was beginning to draw back. It was beginning to reduce fares. And you know, only Uber could do this. Only Uber could come to its workers and say, you know what, we're going to cut the fares and you're going to earn more money. You know,
Right.
you're good. This is going to be great for you. We're going to cut prices and you're going to earn more money. And because it's a ratcheting down of the market, we bring in more workers. And then the only way we can all earn money is by stimulating more demand by dropping prices. So you're ratcheting down the market all the time. So he and I came together around that time where he was sort of organizing workers on pay, and the first sort of pay pressure that Uber experienced in the United Kingdom. And I had been assaulted and I wasn't satisfied with how Uber dealt with that. And we went to our lawyers together at the time to say, how do we challenge these things? And that's where we realized that we did have these limited worker rights that fall short of full employment rights. And we started down that route. Uber fought it every step of the way. So we went from.
Let me just stop you for one second. So just to get a sense of how Uber entered into the market there, and also just be careful of your microphone. I think is on your desk there, and you don't want to rattle that. One of the ways that Uber built its business was essentially by ignoring, at least in this country, local ordinances and laws, and sort of just playing out the clock in some way. We're going to get in here. We're going to ignore the local ordinances that in some instances protected drivers, in some instances protected customers. And we're going to go in there and we're going to just sort of create facts on the ground and then work on it there. Did they do that same thing in London? I mean, was that the way that they approached this, or did they, was there some other sort of construct that allowed them to sort of flood this market? Because, you know, to a certain extent, what they're also doing is sort of like, you know, what drug dealers do. Here's the product. The first one's free, and then you got to start paying, you know, more and more. It's also on some level what, you know, you'll see big chain businesses do. We're going to come in with our coffee shops and we're going to put 5 on this block, and any of the local coffee shops, they're going to go under, and then we're going to close 3 or 4 of those. And we're just going to be the only coffee shop on the block. What was how did Uber enter into London in that way?
Uber did exactly the same thing. And, you know, I think it was something that Travis Kalanick, the founder at the time, it was very much a culture of his, was what did he call it? Principled opposition, I think he called it, or principled defiance, I think he called it. But it's very much in the time tradition way of move fast and break things, right, of Silicon Valley, where that type of thing is encouraged. I think the thing that's interesting is that after Dara Khosrowshahi came in to be CEO of Uber and promised that Uber would grow up, but Uber is still following this same model of being defiant about what local laws are. I mean, it started in February when we won at the Supreme Court. Uber came out of the Supreme Court and literally on the steps said, well, this doesn't apply to us. This applies to a number of people in a space of time in 2016 when our business and our app was totally different, and just tried to literally put it in a box. It didn't get away with that, but it is still not accepted the full ruling. It is still not committed itself to implementing that ruling in full. And what's even more disturbing is that the government isn't forcing them to. The government, we don't have effective enforcement of the rules in this country and in many countries. And with somebody like Uber, you not only need the laws, but you need very active enforcement. And I say active because not only because of their behavioral pattern, but also because of their ability to quickly innovate that business model. All they have to do is make some changes in the app, shake it all up, and we all have to start litigating for another 7 years again.
Hi, I'm Sam Seder. You can watch the rest of this interview and more on our Peacock show, which streams at 5 p.m. weekdays on The Choice from Peacock TV.